The culture of Vietnam is one of the oldest in Southeast Asia, with the ancient Bronze Age Dong Son culture being widely considered one of its most important progenitors. Due to 1,000 years of Chinese rule, Vietnam was heavily influenced by Chinese culture in terms of politics, government, Confucian social and moral ethics, and art. Vietnam is considered to be part of the East Asian cultural sphere. Following independence from China in the 10th century, Vietnam began a southward expansion that saw the annexation of territories formerly belonging to the Champa civilization and parts of the Khmer Empire, which resulted in minor regional variances in Vietnam's culture due to exposure to these different groups. During the French colonial period, Vietnamese culture absorbed various influences from the Europeans, including the spread of Catholicism and the adoption of the Latin alphabet. Prior to this, Vietnamese had used both Chinese characters and a script called Ca Nam, which was based on Chinese but included newly invented characters meant to represent native Vietnamese words. In the socialist era, the cultural life of Vietnam has been deeply influenced by government-controlled media and the cultural influences of socialist programs. For many decades, foreign cultural influences were shunned and emphasis placed on appreciating and sharing the culture of communist nations such as the Soviet Union, China, Cuba and others. Since the 1990s, Vietnam has seen a greater re-exposure to Asian, European and American culture and media. Some elements generally considered to be characteristic of Vietnamese culture include ancestor veneration, respect for community and family values, handicrafts and manual labor, and devotion to study. Important symbols present in Vietnamese culture include dragons, turtles, lotuses and bamboo. Organization. In terms of societal levels of organization, the two most important units are Loeng and Na degree AC. Vietnamese people usually say that Loeng goes hand in hand with Na degree AC. Intermediate organizational units are Cuisine, Za Pound, and Ta Permil Nh, kinship. Kinship plays an important role in Vietnam. Unlike Western culture's emphasis on individualism, Eastern culture values the roles of family and clanship. Comparing with Eastern cultures, Chinese culture values family over clan while Vietnamese culture values clan over family. Each clan has a patriarch, clan altar, and death commemorations attended by the whole clan. Most inhabitants are related by blood. That fact is still seen in village names such as Aang Zab, Ka Sentu Zab, La Zab, so on so forth. In the Western Highlands the tradition of many families in a clan residing in a longhouse is still popular. In the majority of rural Vietnam today one can still see 3 or 4 generations living under one roof. Marriage. The traditional Vietnamese wedding is one of the most important of traditional Vietnamese occasions. Regardless of westernization, many of the age-old customs practiced in a traditional Vietnamese wedding continue to be celebrated by both Vietnamese in Vietnam and overseas, often combining both Western and Eastern elements. In the past, both men and women were expected to be married at young ages. Marriages were generally arranged by the parents and extended family, with the children having limited say in the matter. In modern Vietnam, this has changed as people freely choose their own marriage partners. Generally there are 2 main ceremonies, Laam Hai, sometime before the wedding, the groom and his family visit the bride and her family with round lacquered boxes known as betrothal presents. The quantity of boxes must be an odd number. The presents include acan nuts, betel leaves, tea, cake, fruits, wine, other various delicacies and money. The presents are covered with red paper or cloth, and they are carried by unmarried girls or boys. Both families agree to pick a good date for the wedding. La Qui degree AI, on the wedding day, the groom's family and relatives go to the bride's house to ask permission for the groom to marry and take his bride to his house. Guests would be invited to come and celebrate the couple's marriage. The couple pray before the altar asking their ancestors for permission for their marriage, then to express their gratitude to both groom's and bride's parents for raising and protecting them. Funeral ceremony. Wake. When a person passes away in Vietnam, the surviving family holds a wake or vigil that typically lasts about 5 to 6 days, but may last longer if the surviving family is waiting for other traveling relatives. the body is washed and dressed. A linum ham, or chopstick, is laid between the teeth and a pinch of rice and 3 coins are placed in the mouth. The body is put on a grass mat laid on the ground according to the saying, being born from the earth, one must return back to the earth. The dead body is enveloped with white cloth, le carmiem, and placed in a coffin, le nhap quan. Finally, the funeral ceremony, le thanhpuc, is officially performed. Funeral: the surviving family wear coarse gauze turbans and tunics for the funeral. There are 2 types of funeral processions. Traditional: the date and time for the funeral procession, le duotang, must be carefully selected. Relatives, friends, and descendants take part in the funeral procession to accompany the dead along the way to the burial ground. Votives are dropped along the way. At the grave site, the coffin is lowered and buried. After 3 days of mourning, the family visits the tomb again, le moka ma, or worship the opening the grave. After 49 days, le chuang that, the family stops bringing rice for the dead to the altar. And finally, after 100 days, the family celebrates tot kok, or the end of the tears. After 1 year is the ceremony of the first anniversary of the relative's death, and after 2 years is the ceremony of the end of mourning. Nowadays, mourning ceremonies follow new rituals which are simplified. They consist of covering and putting the dead body into the coffin, the funeral procession, the burial of the psyche into the grave, and the visits to the tomb. In Vietnam, the family of the deceased undergo a ritual after 100 days of them passing away, where the whole family sits in pairs in a long line up to a single member of the family. A monk will place a thin piece of cotton over the family member's head and ring a bell and chant while rotating the bell around the deceased's head, sending them into a trance and open a way for the deceased to return to the living. A bamboo tree with only leaves on the top with small pieces of paper with the deceased's name written on them will start to wave when the deceased is coming. They believe that after 100 days the deceased may return to this realm and possess the body of the member of the family undergoing the ritual, and once it is completed the other members of the family can communicate with the spirit of the deceased through the tranced family member. Normally this ritual will take all day to prepare and then as long as 6 hours praying and chanting, changing the family member at the front of the line. Afterwards they will then burn a paper house and paper-made possessions so that they may take it through to their next life with them. Religion and philosophy. Religion in Vietnam has historically been largely defined by the East Asian mix of Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, known locally as the Tam Gio, or triple religion. Beyond Tam Gio, Catholicism is also practiced in modern Vietnam. Vietnamese Buddhism has typically been the most popular. This fits perfectly with the triple religion concept, making it difficult for many Vietnamese to identify exactly which religion they practice. Besides the triple religion, Vietnamese life was also profoundly influenced by the practice of ancestor worship, as well as native animism. Most Vietnamese people, regardless of religious denomination, practice ancestor worship and have an ancestor altar at their home or business, a testament to the emphasis Vietnamese culture places on filial duty. Along with obligations to clan and family, education has always played a vital role in Vietnamese culture. In ancient times, scholars were placed at the top of society. Men not born of noble blood could only elevate their status by studying for the rigorous imperial examination. Similar to Mandarin officials, passing the examination could potentially open doors to a government position, granting them power and prestige. Literature. Vietnamese literature includes 2 major components, folk literature and written literature. The 2 forms developed simultaneously and are profoundly interrelated. Vietnamese folk literature came into being very early and had a profound effect on the spiritual life of the Viet. The folk literature contributed to the formation of Vietnam's national identity with praising beauty, humanism, and the love of goodness. Legends, fairy tales, humorous stories, folk songs, epic poems have a tremendous vitality and have lived on until today. Written literature was born roughly in the 10th century. Up until the 21st century, there had been 2 components existing at the same time, works written in the Han characters and works written in the Nam character. Since the 1920s, Written literature has been mainly composed in the national language with profound renovations in form and category such as novels, new-style poems, short stories and dramas, and with diversity in artistic tendency. Written literature attained speedy development after the August Revolution, when it was directed by the Vietnamese Communist Party's guideline and focused on the people's fighting and work life. Modern Vietnamese literature has developed from romanticism to realism, from heroism in wartime to all aspects of life, and soared into ordinary life to discover the genuine values of the Vietnamese people. Classical literature generated such masterpieces as Truyen Q, Kung Oen Nga Sentem Ka Si, Chinh Ph Unum, and Quoc Thai Tap. Some brilliant female poets are Hak Shua Senten He Degree Ng, Don Thai Diem, and Ba Hua En Than Quan. In Vietnamese modern prose, there were authors who could emulate whomever in the world, namely, Nguyen Cong Hong, Vu Trong Phung, Nga Ta Yen Tita, Nguyen Hong, Nguyen Tuan and Nam Cao. They were joined by excellent poets, Xua Senten Da Yu, Hu Ka En, Han Mak Tu, and Nguyen Bin. Regrettably, their great works that faithfully reflected the country and the times have yet to appear. Visual arts. Traditional Vietnamese art is art practiced in Vietnam or by Vietnamese artists, from ancient times to post-Chinese domination art which was strongly influenced by Chinese Buddhist art, among other philosophies such as Taoism and Confucianism. The art of Champa and France also played a smaller role later on. The Chinese influence on Vietnamese art extends into Vietnamese pottery and ceramics, calligraphy, and traditional architecture. Currently, Vietnamese lacquer paintings have proven to be quite popular. Calligraphy has had a long history in Vietnam, previously using Chinese characters along with Ca Nam. However, most modern Vietnamese calligraphy instead uses the Roman character-based Cuisine, which has proven to be very popular. In the past, with literacy in the old character-based writing systems of Vietnam being restricted to scholars and elites, calligraphy nevertheless still played an important part in Vietnamese life. On special occasions such as the Lunar New Year, people would go to the village teacher or scholar to make them a calligraphy hanging. People who could not read or write also often commissioned at temple shrines. Performing arts, music. Vietnamese music varies slightly in the three regions, Ba Si or North, Trung or Central, and Nam or South. Northern classical music is Vietnam's oldest and is traditionally more formal. Vietnamese classical music can be traced to the Mongol invasions, when the Vietnamese captured a Chinese opera troupe. Central classical music shows the influences of Champa culture with its melancholic melodies. Southern music exudes a lively laissez-faire attitude. Vietnam has some 50 national music instruments, in which the set of percussion instruments is the most popular, diverse and long-lasting such as RNRY, RN Tran, RNNHA, RN Bar Section U. The set of blowing instruments is represented by flutes and pan pipes, while the set of string instruments is specified by Dan Bao and Dan Day. The Vietnamese folk songs are rich in forms and melodies of regions across the country, ranging from Ga Sent Empty, Ha Ti Ru, Hector Square to Ha Ti Quan Ha, Trong Quan, Kshon, Dum, Va Gia M, Ka Hui, Ba I Ka Square Dai, Li. Apart from this, there are also other forms like Ha Ti Zak Copyright M, Ka Section U Va Florin N, and Ka Tra to the First. Two of the most widely known genres are Imperial Court music, when referring specifically to the NHA-NHAC form. It includes court music from the Tra section N dynasty on to the Nguyen dynasty. It is an elaborate form of music which features an extensive array of musicians and dancers, dressed in extravagant costumes. It was an integral part of the rituals of the imperial court. Ka Tra to the First, an ancient form of chamber music which originated in the imperial court. It gradually came to be associated with a geisha type of entertainment where talented female musicians entertained rich and powerful men, often scholars and bureaucrats who most enjoyed the genre. It was condemned in the 20th century by the government, being tied falsely with prostitution, but recently it has seen a revival as appreciation for its cultural significance has grown. Kha I has been recognized by UNESCO as a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity since 2005. In the 20th century, in contact with the Western culture, especially after the national independence, many new categories of arts like plays, photography, cinemas, and modern art had taken shape and developed strongly, obtaining huge achievements with the contents reflecting the social and revolutionary realities. Up to 1997, there have been 44 people operating in cultural and artistic fields honored with the Ho Chi Minh Award, 130 others conferred with People's Artist Honor, and 11 people awarded with the Excellent Artist Honor. At the start of 1997, there were 191 professional artistic organizations and 26 film studios. There have been 28 movies, 49 scientific and documentary films receiving International Motion Picture Awards in many countries. Theatre. Ha-Ti-Tu-Ang, a theatre form strongly influenced by Chinese opera, it transitioned from being entertainment for the royal court to travelling troupes who performed for commoners and peasants, featuring many well-known stock characters. Ka-Pound-I-Lay-Degree-Ng, a kind of modern folk opera originating in South Vietnam, which utilizes extensive vibrato techniques. It remains very popular in modern Vietnam when compared to other folk styles. Ha-Ti-Kao, Kao is a form of generally satirical musical theatre, often encompassing dance, traditionally performed by Vietnamese peasants in northern Vietnam. It is usually performed outdoors by semi-amateur touring groups, stereotypically in a village square or the courtyard of a public building, although it is today increasingly also performed indoors and by professional performers. Water puppetry. Water puppetry is a distinct Vietnamese art which had its origins in the 10th century and very popular in northern region. In water puppetry, a split bamboo screen obscures puppets which stand in water, and are manipulated using long poles hidden beneath the water. Epic storylines are played out with many different puppets, often using traditional scenes of Vietnamese life. The puppets are made from quality wood, such as the Southeast Asian jackfruit tree. Each puppet is carefully carved, and then painted with numerous successive layers of paint to protect the puppets. Despite nearly dying out in the 20th century, water puppetry has been recognized by the Vietnamese government as an important part of Vietnam's cultural heritage. Today, puppetry is commonly performed by professional puppeteers, who typically are taught by their elders in rural areas of Vietnam. Dance. Vietnam has 47 different ethnicities, each with their own traditional dance. Among the ethnic Vietnamese majority, there are several traditional dances performed widely at festivals and other special occasions, such as the lion dance. In the imperial court there also developed throughout the centuries a series of complex court dances which require great skill. Some of the more widely known are the imperial lantern dance, fan dance, and platter dance, among others. Communication. Vietnamese society is greatly interdependent and community value is highly appreciated, so communication is essential in relationship establishment in Vietnam. As a result, hospitality is a standard of behavior. Vietnamese prefer an indirect communication style. In communication, they seek agreement and compromise, so arguments are not often used and the sense toward others and mutual understanding are crucial principles to follow. Cuisine. Vietnamese cuisine is extremely diverse, often divided into three main categories, each pertaining to Vietnam's three main regions. It uses very little oil and many vegetables, and is mainly based on rice, soy sauce, and fish sauce. Its characteristic flavors are sweet, spicy, sour, nuoc mam, and flavored by a variety of mint and basil. Vietnam also has a large variety of noodles and noodle soups. Different regions invented different types of noodles, varying in shapes, tastes, colors, etc. One of the nation's most famous type of noodles is Pho Huai, a type of noodle soup originating in North Vietnam, which consists of rice noodles and beef soup with several other ingredients such as bean sprouts and scallions. It is often eaten for breakfast, but also makes a satisfying lunch or light dinner. The boiling stock, fragrant with spices and sauces, is poured over the noodles and vegetables, poaching the paper-thin slices of raw beef just before serving. Pho is meant to be savored, incorporating several different flavors: the sweet flavor of beef, sour lemons, salty fish sauce, and fresh vegetables. Currently, Vietnamese cuisine has been gaining popularity and can be found widely in many other countries such as the United States, Australia, Canada, South Korea, Laos, Japan, China, Malaysia, and France. Vietnamese cuisine is recognized for its strict, sometimes choosy selection of ingredients. A chef preparing authentic Vietnamese cuisine may incorporate the ingredients provided in these countries, but generally will prefer ingredients native to Vietnam. Clothing. In feudal Vietnam, clothing was one of the most important marks of social status and strict dress codes were enforced. Prior to the Nguyen dynasty, people not of noble birth could dress quite liberally with only few restrictions on styles. For example, wearing yellow color in the La 1/2 dynasty was tolerable since the imperial clan wore red and white color. However, things changed at the beginning of the Nguyen dynasty. Commoners now had a limited choice of similarly plain and simple clothes for everyday use, as well as being limited in the colors they were allowed to use. For instance, commoners were not allowed to wear clothes with dyes other than black, brown or white, but in actuality these rules could change, often based upon the whims of the current ruler. The Ao Ta copyright thus in 10 or 4-part dress is one such example of an ancient dress widely worn by commoner women, along with the Ao Yim bodice which accompanied it. Peasants across the country also gradually came to wear silk pajama-like costumes, known as Ao Kawen H in the north and Ao Ba in the south. The headgear differed from time to time. People of the La 1/2 dynasty and Nguyen dynasty often put on a plain piece of cloth wrapped around the head, while in Tra section N dynasty and La dynasty leaving the headband was more common. Beside of the popular Na cubed en La, a vast array of other hats and caps were available, constructed from numerous different types of materials, ranging from silk to bamboo and horsehair. Even the Na cubed en La used to take several different shapes and sizes, now only 2 styles still persist. For footwear, peasants would often go barefoot, whereas sandals and shoes were reserved for the aristocracy and royalty. Nguyen monarchs had the exclusive right to wear the color gold, while nobles wore red or purple. In the past the situation was different. In dynasty and La 1/2 dynasty rulers wore red, and Tra section N dynasty emperors wore white. Each member of the royal court had an assortment of different formal gowns they would wear at a particular ceremony, or for a particular occasion. The rules governing the fashion of the royal court could change dynasty by dynasty, thus costumes of the Vietnamese court were quite diverse. However, certain fundamental concepts applied. The most popular and widely recognized Vietnamese national costume is the Ao Da I. Ao Da I was once worn by both genders, but today it is worn mainly by women, except for certain important traditional culture-related occasions where some men do wear it. Ao Da I consists of a long gown with a slit on both sides, worn over cotton or silk trousers. Adoption and enforcement of Ao Cube Da I took place in the mid-18th century by the rulers of Hue. They decided that their garments had to be distinctive to set themselves apart from the people of Tonkin, where Ao La copyright NH and NH Uque section N were worn. White Ao Da I is the required uniform for girls in many high schools across Vietnam. In some types of offices, women are also required to wear Ao Da I. In daily life, the traditional Vietnamese styles are now replaced by Western styles. Traditional clothing is worn instead on special occasions, with the exception of the white Ao Da I commonly seen with high school girls in Vietnam. Martial arts. Vietnamese martial arts are highly developed from the country's very long history of warfare and attempts to defend itself from foreign occupation. Although most heavily influenced by Chinese martial arts, it has developed its own characteristics throughout the millennia in combination with other influences from its neighbors. Vietnamese martial arts is deeply spiritual due to the influence of Confucianism, Buddhism and Taoism, and is strongly reliant on the Viet Vo Dao. It is probably most famous for its scissor kicks. The general Vietnamese term for martial arts is Va Micron Thua Thi. Some of the more popular include, Vo Company Tree in Vietnam, Vo Vinam Viet Vade, Vo That Van Vo Dao, Vo That Bin Din, Vo Bac Nin. Vietnamese martial arts remains relatively unknown in the world today when compared to its counterparts from China, Japan, Korea or Thailand. However, this is seeing a definite change as schools teaching various styles of Vietnamese martial arts are starting to pop up all over the world, notably in countries such as Spain. Holidays and other important days. Vietnam celebrates many holidays, including traditional holidays which have been celebrated in Vietnam for thousands of years, along with modern holidays imported predominantly from Western countries. Among the traditional holidays, the two most important and widely celebrated are the Lunar New Year, followed by the Mid-Autumn Lantern Festival, although the latter has been losing ground in recent years. Public holidays, other holidays. World and intangible cultural heritage. Vietnam has a number of UNESCO-listed World Heritage Sites, as well as cultural relics deemed as intangible heritage. These are split into specific categories: Cultural Heritage Sites, HAM Registered Trademark An, an ancient city and trading center. Imperial City of Hue Complex of monuments in the former imperial capital. Mata the First Cn, ancient temple complex of the former Champa civilization in Quay Pound Ng Nam Province. Natural Heritage Sites, Phong Nha Cave located in Quay Pound Ng Ba Nh Province, Ha Long Bay. Intangible Cultural Heritage, Nha Pound Nhac, a form of Vietnamese court music. Space of Gong Culture, Ka Tra to the First, Quan Ha. There are a number of other potential World Heritage Sites, as well as intangible cultural heritages which Vietnam has completed documents on for UNESCO's recognition in the future. See also: History of Vietnam, Cinema of Vietnam, Communications in Vietnam, Media of Vietnam, List of museums in Vietnam, Politics of Vietnam, Vietnamese name, Vietnamese language, Bao Iu, Vietnamese studies, references. Releasing the 2009 Population and Housing Census preliminary results. People's Committee of Ho Chi Minh City. Vietnamese Culture and Society. Embassy of Vietnam in the USA. External links, Vetoch. This site is dedicated to the promotion of Vietnamese history and culture. See reviews of the site. Vietnamese culture and society. Embassy of Vietnam in the USA. Vietnamese culture and history. Vitespring.org. Vietnam Cultural Profile, Vietnamese culture and traditions, Vietnamese poetry, Vietnamese culture and traditions, Vietnamese Culture Index, Vietnam Online, Vietnam in Photo.